there it is. Mm-hmm. My dad, 3 times a week, he was the editor of the newspaper, editor-in-chief, and 3 times a week he would do a radio show at a local radio station interviewing people, talking about what was going on in our small city. He had a great voice, so I'm going to try and channel that voice here in the interview.
Okay. So tell me, how would this interview that photographs books be more promotional of books than an interview that photographed our faces?
Oh, yes. Well, for one, faces are best seen up close in real life. And books, anytime you see books, it's good. They have an image beyond, they have just kind of a wooden but beautiful image. And they are an image. They're an image of somebody's thoughts. Well, we are not images of ourselves. We really are ourselves. So I'm a little leery about having my face in an interview. I'd rather, voice. You suggested voice, Joni, and our poetry, the Tsunami Books poetry stage, which has been the stage for at least many hundreds of poetry and performance, spoken word performance moments.
So tell me, how did this begin? How did you first get this store, a bookstore, and how did it become a beautiful venue for writers and speakers?
I was working in the woods and my body was blowing out. I knew at some point I had to change careers or become a cripple. So I started looking for things to do, things I knew about, and I was not real happy about my options for what I knew as far as making a living. I knew I could make a good living, but those things didn't interest me much. Both my parents owned bookstores for periods, and our house, of course, was a house of books. So I came around, I went to work for Black Sun, in fact. When he first opened, I was his first employee, and sold a lot of books there for a couple of years. Then he wanted to expand. He wanted to open a second store, and he asked me. And I turned him down. I didn't feel like it. And the other guy, then I also, at that point, I had quit working for that store. And the guy who came in working, David Rhodes, he asked David, well, let's do it. And he and David started this.
About what years?
I think that was 95.
Okay.
They spent $1,000 and bought the guts of a bookstore in Portland that had gone belly up. The ladders, that was a wonderful thing, but the rest was pressboard and what they call modern display items, probably in the late 70s, early 80s, kind of funky, but it was enough for the front end. After a year, it became clear they did not want to be partners. And I'd come off a really bad couple of jobs where I was working and did not want to continue that anymore. So David suggested that I buy out Peter, which I did. And David and I worked 12 years together then. Mm-hmm. Yeah, side by side. Only had one argument, 12 years.
I remember those years.
Yeah, they were good. And David knew a lot. He was into theater. He was into music, performance, production. He understood all that. Uh-huh. Plus, he had been a bookstore manager in Chicago when he was younger, and he had the rap. He knew how to say things. Sometimes you have to assure the people without even knowing yourself. And David had this thing he'd go, And it was very nice. How you say it was, working on that sound. And I've been working on that now for 20 years.
What was his last name? I forget his last name.
Rhodes.
Rhodes. Yeah.
Rhodes, from Chicago via Berkeley. So he mostly took the lead. I would do a lot of the peripheral things initially.
As in?
Oh, cleaning the books, going out buying a lot of the books, bringing them in. When we would, I organized a few events. I would do the setup and tear down. At that time, we just had the front of the store. There was a little grand piano and very few books. It was kind of open, friendly, but not much of a bookstore. I oftentimes could not find a single book I wanted to read, which was sad. Maybe if I were in jail and was let out, I would have found more interest in some of those books. But anyway, my reading wasn't that broad at that point, too. We had the opera, but we kept growing. We kept growing.
How did you grow?
We believed that energy equals capital. We were both politically radical. This was a period when capital was equaling capital. Only capital equals capital. It used to be to the worker goes the spoil, and then it became to the people with money goes the spoil. And then as things like hedge funds, etc., entered in, it became a math equation where debt equaled capital. And that was beyond our thinking. We both were skilled and could have followed those things, but morally they were empty. Mm-hmm. And the arts were full. So we went with the arts. We were both young, energetic. And we figured, well, that's all it takes. This is America. You work hard. Mm-hmm. You're doing something ethical. You're going to make good living.
And so, continue.
Well, that didn't happen. I lost my house immediately. We worked for free pretty much for most of the first 12 years. And I wound up living in the bookstore for a while. Eventually, I think David was making a couple hundred a month, and then maybe we were each up to $500 a month. It was pathetic. I mean, we're talking 21st century, full-time job. This is what we had, and we didn't have the money to grow.
How did you grow?
Well, we just kept that energy thing going. We got better trading. We got really good at buying used books, not shortchanging people in the store. We tried to, our theory in the store was pay more than anyone else in town and charge less. Kind of a crazy theory, but it was the way to be ultimately fair. We couldn't buy a lot in the store under that theory, but we'd go out. Back then there were a lot of yard sales. Books were cheap in many different ways, and we would find them slowly grow. Plus, we just, we enjoyed each other's company and really enjoyed the community of good people who came in. That was the thing. Yeah, they were just rich, poor, didn't matter. They put their best persons on when they came in the bookstore, and I think that's one of the glories of bookstores.
And then you became a kind of a center for the writing communities of Eugene.
We started up front. We had one great public read. It was frustrating that there were so many cliques. I use that word very carefully here. We're talking the Lane Literary Guild, which of course
is trying to open up. That's the whole idea of this website. Very important. Yes.
And to bring at least start by bringing all the Lane Literary Guild people together. It's a lesson for the country. The country needs it.
Yeah.
But certainly the writers in Eugene have been cliquish forever.
And we're trying now to connect between, that's what I was saying, the spoken word and the, official poetry people and the non-poetry, fiction, nonfiction, and then the university people. And we're trying to find a way to make a site that's going to be good for everyone. To advertise their books that have just come out, to advertise readings, events, that everyone will go to this one site. And
nice. Are you going to have a Facebook tied to it, Lane Literary Guild Facebook?
Yes.
Because then you can just have the link and back and forth. It's
Exactly.
very interesting.
Yep. That's the
That
plan.
would take, that's going to take some serious volunteer action energy.
They
But
have the volunteers. So
wow, that's amazing. And it's needed here in town. Lots of little groups come and go over the years.
Mhm.
Lane Literary Guild. I remember how exciting. I mean, I was coming out of the woods, and when they first started, it was Jenny and Eric and two or three others were kind of putting it in, and they had a reading at the Holt Center.
yeah.
I remember going, I think maybe during a Eugene celebration, an early Eugene celebration. It was amazing. And why we can't do that again, I don't know. I think we can. That's what we tried here when we first got started. I was from the woods, and I did not see the difference in personalities so much that created these different groups.
Mm-hmm.
I did see the smallness that came out, and it hurt to see that, artists and writers who really were not being supportive of each other.
Stop. Make sure this is working.
Yeah.
Continue.
Well, so Dave and I, we had a lot of downtime here at the store, think time. It's like, let's have the greatest reading this town's ever had. That was our ambition.
Okay.
And bring in all the genres in the poetry world. Spoken word, the university, the beat
Great.
poets,
Yes.
just regular folk. And we got 19 of them.
And again, when was this?
This was maybe 97, early 97.
Okay.
People like, we had Garrett Hongo and Dorian Locks, for instance. Ty Connor, who was sort of the polar opposite. Frank Rossini, Mike McGriff, Jenny Root. Cecilia Hagen. 19, Eric Muller. I think I got up there. I had some pretty strong pieces at that point. And it was up front, packed house, everybody loving it. Up by the counter, of course, we had a little table with about 30 bottles on a little tiny table. So it was kind of poets drinking and listening to, and maybe well over 100 people in that little front end. All ages, which was very exciting and powerful stuff. And our bottom line was, give us the best 5 minutes you've got in your life. That's what we would come to people with.
Wow.
And it was quite a reading. Unfortunately, poets from two different schools, actually we'll call them cliques, because it wasn't very intelligent. Two of them got drunk outside and challenged each other to a death match, and not poetic. And
wait a minute.
Oh my God. Jesus, it was. I don't want to go too far into that. Anybody who asks about it, come and ask me. This will be a test to see if you've listened to this interview.
Okay.
It didn't happen, but a lot of people really lost desire for doing it again. It was, and I saw it was disappointing. At any rate, not long after that, we were told that we either had to take over the whole building or give up the bookstore. They needed a tenant for the whole building, and we either had to take it or go. And Dave and I came up with this theory: go for broke or go broke. We did go broke, but we kept working. Tips or living in the store, living with our girlfriends, whatever it took. And we built this back end completely out of recycled wood.
Wow.
I had 6 months. I'd plant trees for 6 months, and then I'm laid off for 6 months. That's the way it worked back then. So while I was laid off from tree planting, I would come in here and just build. We didn't know what we were doing. We had a great builder helping us, but every day we would just think about, well, what do we want to do with this? And what do we want to do with that? One thought we had was to have a little stage where we had poetry books, and it could possibly be a table area for a cafe was one thought, or just a place for people to come up and write was another thought, free tea and write. And of course, Dave was seriously into music, so we thought, well, we could have some musicians up here, maybe some theater people. Dave was also into theater. The stage is a whole nother story, a whole other story. The main thing is it's here.
Yes.
It's kind of a 1,000-year stage in many ways, the way it was built. It's really got a lot of heft, solidity, built mostly from recycled high school and university gymnasium bleachers, and pallet wood from the Amazon that turned out to be the highest grade wood in the world. Mm-hmm. That's our gym. That's the stage floor, and we have filled it with poetry. I think we've done somewhere in the neighborhood of 3,000 events using this stage now.
Yes, and of all sorts.
Yeah.
You've had theater, you've had poetry.
All forms of poetry.
All forms, yeah. How did you get involved in the spoken word community?
I think Tsunami sponsored, when Sam Bonds first opened, it was a time when what they called poetry slams in America were just getting underway. 96, 97. Sam Bonds wanted to do it. Oh, Jenny, that's right, Jenny Root wanted to do it. She was hanging a little bit at Sam Bonds, as many of us were. She wanted to get one started. And we said we'd sponsor it, give $100 to the first prize, okay, which was a lot of money in 96.
Yeah.
And maybe 50 for the second prize. I can't remember, 25 for third. And filled the bar, did it 2 or 3 times, had some excellent MCs, some really good poetry, some bad, poetry slam. It runs the gamut. When we finished there, it began at a bookstore called Fool's Cap over in 8th and Blair. She picked it up for a few years, Marietta, who had worked here and liked it here and started her own bookstore. She had a lot of energy for the spoken word, and I was very excited about it. I had a lot of sounds that came out of me. I was used to speechifying, making speeches and just talking, and had a lot of private time too, so I would write these little stories that could become story poems, narrative poems. So I enjoyed it. It's a wonderful process for workshopping. When there's 100 people staring at you while you're reciting a poem, in any format, their reactions affect your rewrite.
Oh, absolutely.
It's a wonderful process.
Yeah.
It goes way beyond, of course, any form of poetry. When she went, she closed her business.
Wait, she?
Marietta, the Fool's Cap, where the slams were occurring. And she came, or the people who wanted to keep it going eventually came to us. And we came up with a good idea. We had a quite young woman at that time, Jorah LaFleur.
I was going to ask you where she fit in here.
It was a threesome, and she was the dynamo. She obviously, they were all 3 leaders, but she was the leader of leaders.
Yes.
So it was just like, okay, if Jorah's going to get up on the stage, we'll get a crowd.
Yes.
Because one thing we know here at Tsunami, very important, is we know what not making money and paying rent is all about. Mm-hmm. And it's hell. In America, it's the worst hell. It's worse hell here than anywhere else in the world because this is a land of so much money. And if you worked 80, 90 hours a week and you can't pay your rent, you feel something inside that is, we don't want to go there.
Right.
Jorah could bring in a crowd and a paying crowd.
Yeah.
Cheap, but she also could write a grant. Mm-hmm. And we set up grants where almost anyone could write one. Mm-hmm. And get a little money to help out. We figured out we'd get 100 people in here for an evening, and very cheap, and we paid a lot of people to perform and to help. We thought that artists needed to actually make a little money, even if the store didn't.
Right.
And it just kept growing. Her energy was very good, stayed strong. Actually, we just finished that series. It was 9 years. Jorah stepped up on the stage, we figure, about 2,500 times. I did sound, and I figure I had to adjust sound on about 1,400 performers. And a couple of them weren't very good.
You could have adjusted it down.
I did. Oftentimes, I gave someone a win one time because this person was bellowing. They're your classic person to ruin the performance poetry by doing their angst into a microphone rather than stepping away or what have you. Working a microphone is an art. Mm-hmm. But while that was going on, of course, the Lane Literary Guild continued to have readings, lots of readings, and they shifted here. That was a wonderful thing. We had also people like Robert Bly came through town.
I remember that.
Yeah. Right here on the stage, and all day.
What I never forgot was him reading every poem twice. I love that.
That was real important.
Yeah.
It was a little pedantic how he laid it out, but the theory was extremely sound.
Yes.
And other people have done it, and it makes a world of difference.
Absolutely.
Another thing would be if people, like for instance, Eric Muller with Trap Rock Books was great. I can't remember. I keep asking him, 35, 40 different Oregon poets. He published little books in his retirement.
Right.
Nice books, well laid out, really high quality paper, much better than you can get in modern print on demand. And they were all affordable, and he sold out most of them. And paid for he didn't make any money, but it paid for his love for 8 or 10 years of doing it, got him around the state, got a lot of well-known poets, and every time a new poet would come out, he'd get in touch, we'd have an event here, and we'd bring in two or three other poets, always good, always well-received, and people would buy the book to show support for each other. This is a book by a legitimate local press, Trap Rock Books, and they wanted to buy it. So there was another little way. It was like, wow, poets. And the other thing, we noticed something very interesting about poets, which is their reading abilities very broad. They're not particularly just reading poetry. They do read poetry, which is, it's a small group of people who really read poetry. It's a special brain that you have to turn on a certain switch in your head to understand. But they read in all directions. And these people would come in, we'd have these readings, and they'd be one of our best sales days of the year.
Okay.
We loved it. Not only were these people we knew who came in and shopped all the time, but they were buying books. So these little events were working. We're like, wow. And we had already, of course, learned in that long time ago with the 19 poets, make sure everybody's compatible.
Right.
You know, can't have fight break.
No, never again.
Never, not between poets. It's,
At least they didn't have a duel.
no, oh my God, what an interesting night that was. Still memorable.
So let's jump into the present. What's happening now?
Yeah, because that's the most important part. Well, we closed down a couple of performance poetry series here recently. We had a every third Saturday that had different incarnations over the years, Readers Series it was called, and sometimes had open mic, sometimes didn't, and that was off and on for several years and is no more here. Likewise, the Poetry Slam is not here, and we do have a women's open mic.
Oh.
Once a month, January through May. We got some big grants to do it.
Nice.
Very happy about that. And we got staff who are energized about it. Very important. Give workers a reason to be here.
And who are they? The staff?
Bailey Fisher, who's been here a little over a year and has worked in other bookstores. But she's very excited about this women's open, this women's stage, I think it's called, because you are allowed to do anything you want for 7 minutes. Predominantly poets, mostly poets, but comedians, some very good musicians have stepped up, like Haley Loren, for instance. You know, she just won a Grammy. She lives in the neighborhood, and she stepped up often. We've had a couple of, if it were outdoors, you would call them fire dancers. In here, they used other forms of light to display their act. But, back and forth, 2-3 hours, if you have anything. There have been fiction writers, story writers step up, nonfiction, political rants in this political season coming. Okay. We had some dynamos step up with speeches. So that's one thing, but that's not enough. We're we've been talking with the Lane Literary Guild, various individuals, and I'm talking with a lot of different groups of people in different circles in Eugene. I want things to work well. We've been here 25 years. I want them professionally run from the beginning. I'm tired of reinventing the wheel. And it's good when people come in where it attracts Tsunami customers. Tsunami customers start coming in to these events. Then as part of the event, they'll do their book shopping. It's like if we were holding this in a grocery store, maybe they'd buy some groceries. Right. But this is a bookstore. We really like people to buy books when they're here. And I'm talking with a couple people in the guild. I'm just waiting for someone with a real idea to just come in and something rather fully formed. Like when Jorah came in and she was with John LaBruce, who's a very well-loved teacher in town now, and Roxy Allen, who does a lot of the makeup and dress for the Holt Center. I mean, these are people of real talent. And they came in, and they'd already had practice. And they were like, this is what we want to do, and this is how we're going to pay for it. And it's going to get, and you can pay your staff, and the building will actually get rented, and performers with the slam.
So this is what you're hoping for the future. Something.
And it may be people with single event ideas. And that's fine. That's fine. a series is nice because people, they get comfortable with it. Joni, you have a series. Is it still going on?
Oh, yeah.
How many years have you been doing this?
About 5.
5, wow.
Yeah.
And
it's not going in the summer, but starts again in September.
And it's been extremely well received.
Yeah.
Everybody likes it. There's only good words. Does Martha still bring food, or is she?
Oh, yeah. So far, so good.
Good, good. What gives her direction? I mean, a lot of us are getting older, but we got a lot of energy, and we want to point that energy, channel it.
Yeah. Well, we're hoping. So tell me, how would you like to say farewell to this interview?
I think I'm going to just describe briefly an experiment that we tried in March, I think. Eric Muller was putting out a selected works. Mm-hmm. It was in process. I kind of moved him a little quick to get it done, but it worked out very well. Mm-hmm. And the idea was, let's get 2 hours of poetry where every single piece moved everyone in the crowd.
Great.
That was the idea. So it was almost back to that original 19 folk. And it was Charles Goodrich and Clem Stark, Clem, who just had a collected works, and Eric Muller, and then Jenny Root. Jenny had other readings. She said, well, I'll do a couple poems. And the 4 of them, we got an email chain going between us all. That was a wonderful process, because these were pros who knew what they wanted and how to do it, and I just kind of directed things a little bit. So it kept me pretty much out of the real organizing. And they picked Jenny. They're like, Jenny, you can ramrod. You can be ramrod, and do the introductions. And Clem came up with the line, who reads when, and the breaks and all of that. And he was a little grumpy because he's 85 and he's being the leader.
Yeah.
It was great. We all loved it. I think, what do we call it? The Team Stark.
Okay.
And we had it. Were you here?
Not in March, no.
March. I think it was March.
Far from me. That's my trouble with evening things.
Yeah, and it was a good one. We did a Saturday afternoon. We started at 3.
Okay.
And that's another idea that will attract a lot more people.
Yes.
There's not so much competition, and it gets people out of their house. Right. And it was 2 hours of pure power.
Wow.
It was beautiful, with a little musical interlude, to kind of mix it up. Some very nice acoustic musicians, friends of Clem's, and all kinds of people. I don't know. There was 70 people.
Great.
All ages, all walks.
Great.
I think one person left. And
probably had to go somewhere.
But that was, and that's what we deserve in this town, because we've been here for a long time, most of us, and at least on the planet.
Yes.
And how it's performed, well, the important thing is get it up on the stage with the idea of giving people something.
Right.
Really giving them something.
And in turn, they'll buy books.
They'll buy books, but they'll give you something. They'll give you, the reader, a certain kind of support that can maybe come in a letter, but it's not going to come in a like on Facebook.
Right.
It's such a personal thing when somebody comes up to you and says, I loved that poem you wrote about this.
And it can change everything. Because I came here at one of your open mic things, and I read some poems that I had written long ago. And by the time I was done, first of all, Eric spoke to me about, you need to get these published. And then Laura, I got in touch with her because Eric told me to. And her response was, I've been meaning to get in touch with you. And I've got a book coming out in September, October.
All right. Okay.
From that.
Utter Chaos, is that the press?
Utter Chaos.
All right. Good. Good.
Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
So, it happened here. Yeah. I'm gonna stop a minute.
That's a good end. It
is.
happened here.
It is. Let's listen to a little bit.
Actually, and your tone of voice was perfect. Yeah.